Hi, Robert here with another episode very quickly after the other one, since news always breaks faster than many of us can get to it and even keep up with it. But this I needed to upload ASAP for you people to see for yourselves. If there was ever a smoking gun to this whole pandemic issue, if there was ever cause for an official investigation, it would be based on what you are about to see and hear in this episode. In one of my previous episodes, and that of many other creators, I covered the controversial Bill HR 6666, which otherwise known as the COVID-19 Testing, Reaching and Contacting Everyone, or TRACE Act. Now, you would do well to remember who exactly brought this bill before the House, and in case you forgot, it was Republican Senator Bobby L. Rush. You know, the guy that had to pay all that money back to the US taxpayer and still is. Bobby Rush is the man to remember here. While many of you are going to call this a seriously smoking gun, I personally say that all 6 shots have been fired and it's time for a congressional investigation into both Bobby Rush and Bill Gates. As you will see, I'll see you on the inside. Hi and welcome to this episode. So let's dive straight in and show you what intrepid reporters have uncovered, and it certainly brings into serious question not just what is being revealed here, but the whole idea of a global pandemic and who had the most to gain from global economic collapse. And it also brings into question the WHO's claims that this was a pandemic when clearly being influenced by financial donations from a single source, and I suspect many of you know exactly who that source is. So let's just jump over to the website I want to show you first. So here we are on the website TruePundit.com. And this was uploaded about an hour ago as I'm reading it. So, exclusive. Bill Gates negotiated $100 billion contact tracing deal with Democratic Congressman, sponsor of the bill 6 months before the coronavirus pandemic. Now, I'm going to read this to you because it's very short and it is unbelievably important. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation helped negotiate who would score a $100 billion government-backed contract in August 2019, 6 months before the pandemic arrived in the United States and 4 months before it swept through China. And it says listen above, and I've got a couple of tracks there that I'm going to play you afterwards. The shocking revelations were unveiled on the Thomas Paine podcast, and I'll leave a link in the description below to these great guys, and the More Paine Show on Patreon, by the 2 investigators who blew the whistle on the massive Clinton Foundation tax fraud during the congressional hearing in 2018. John Moynihan and Larry Doyle testified in Congress, detailing the fraud and schemes utilized by the Clintons to avoid paying up to $2.5 billion in federal taxes. So John and Larry are not armchair creators like me. And they've got very, very good form, and they wouldn't even be coming out with this, I doubt, whether they've got absolute solid evidence for it. Let's move on. The investigative duo, on their first interview since the bombshell congressional testimony, revealed to Paine that representatives from the Gates Foundation met with US Congressman Billy L. Rush at a sit-down in Rwanda, East Africa, in mid-August 2019. Mid-August, guys. Let's just check when Event 201 was held. And as you can see here, this is event 201, which I'm sure you're all aware of. I'm not going to go into the details. So he's sitting down in Rwanda in August, meeting Bobby, the congressman who put the bill forward, and they then met for event 201 in October. August, September, October. All right. So 2 months afterwards, we've got a meeting about contact tracing, and then we've got event 201. Let me just jump back to the rest of the article. So August 2019, to hash out who would score the windfall from a government contract tracing program. Now, why would you need that in August 2019? Seriously, why would you need that then? And just last month, 9 months after the meeting with the Gates Foundation in Rwanda, Rush, a Democrat from Illinois, introduced a 100 billion HR 666, the COVID-19 Testing, Reaching and Contacting Everyone, or TRACE Act, as you can see here. And you can see here it is sponsored by Bobby Rush, the guy that he met in Rwanda, and representatives of the Gates Foundation, according to TruePundit there. And you can see, I'm not going to go through all the details of it, you're probably all fully aware, but this came 9 months afterwards. Let's get back to the art. So the same guy, Bobby Rush, sits down in Rwanda, 9 months later comes out with HR 6666, having met with representatives from the Gates Foundation. Rush's bill would establish a program run by the CDC and for national coronavirus testing and contact tracing. How on earth, if this wasn't premeditated, how on earth would they even know this was going to be needed 9 months ahead of schedule? Payne has since learned Congressman Rush travelled to Rwanda with his wife from August the 12th to the 19th in 2019 to take part in talks at a week-long event underwritten by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. And it goes on to say here, but how can you negotiate the byproducts of monitoring a pandemic 6 to 7 months before the outbreak of the virus even happens? Guys, this is not just a smoking gun. They've fired it 6 months beforehand. And to be honest with you, even just this part here, I'm going to see if I can find some snippets and clips from the Payne podcast in a second for you. But there has got to be a serious congressional investigation into not only Bill Gates talking about the contact tracing app here, but Bobby Rush, who introduced it all those months later, having had a meeting in August between the 12th and the 19th with representatives from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Both Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or at least their representatives at the very least, but I would suspect Bill and Melinda and Bobby Rush need to answer some serious questions about this to Congress, and an investigative committee should absolutely be set up. And not only that, it obviously has connotations for the fact that the whole world economy has been crashed. And the other thing that you've got to remember, folks, is that right at the center of all this, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we've also got the perfect storm, if this is the way we're going, because that perfect storm is made up of the vaccinations, Bill and Melinda Gates, the contact tracing app, Bill and Melinda Gates. We've got the World Health Authority saying it's a pandemic, and who's given the greatest funding to the World Health Authority? Bill and Melinda Gates. Now, obviously, for legal reasons, I'm just pointing out the details, and the common denominator that we all know is Bill and Melinda Gates. But I think at the very least there is definitely need for a congressional investigation into this, and having these people answer some serious questions. If this information proves to be correct, and I have no reason to doubt either John Moynihan and Larry Doyle, considering what their past experience is. Then we could be on the verge of a serious investigation, and if found guilty, God knows where it would go from there. But let's not jump the gun. And just to put this in perspective for you, I've jumped over to another website, and it repeats what I've just told you in essence anyway, and talks about the TruePundit one here. But it goes on. It's not just about the 100 billion. I mean, that is just a ridiculous amount of money, But it was, as the point here, it wasn't just about the 100 billion. That was for the first year only. This is a blank check, folks. Authorization of appropriations to carry out this section. There are no authorizations to be. So, I mean, this is for the fiscal year 2020. But look at point 2. And then such sums as may be necessary for each of the fiscal year 2021 and any subsequent fiscal year during which the emergency period continues, which is why it's going to pay, and we see such a push from this guy to keep this going as long as possible, because it's worth 100. Just the tracing app is worth 100 billion a year and counting. Can you imagine if you add the vaccination system to that as well? And you just happen to be the corporation that's got the deal on the pharmaceuticals, you've got the deal on the testing of this emergency period continues, and you've got the contact tracing app. It goes on to say, why did they think a multi-year contact tracing army would be needed? ? And with a wide open budget after 20 for such sums as may be necessary, which is like the guy says here, that's a blank check for a democratically controlled door-to-door army tracking people deemed dangerous. This is something out of a nightmare, and all of that. Now you can understand why certain philanthropists may invest a little bit at this end, which seems like telephone numbers to us, but when you're talking these numbers, 100 billion and a blank check for every year afterwards, during which the emergency period continues, which is ad infinitum, if everybody remember the new normal, then the amounts of money we're talking about through vaccinations, the contact tracing apps and everything else all seems to leak back in very vast sums to the original sponsors, supporters and philanthropic organizations that put money in at the other end. Let me cover something else with you now. So now I just want to play you a little bit from the Thomas Paine podcast, and you can see and hear for yourselves. I'll leave a link in the description below to the whole show. I suggest you hear it and subscribe, because these guys do a fantastic job.
When we looked, okay, this virus starts hitting the States in whatever it was, late January into February. And in around April 1, we looked like, okay, what are the countries, and what are there, 190, 195 countries, 200 countries in the world, something like that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you this. I know exactly where you're going, because this went through my head too, and I've talked about it. But I'm like, I'm not crazy, because I put the time in to look at the map and to do
well,
things.
So we're going the same place here.
So go ahead.
We looked at the top 20.
Yeah,
the top 20 countries that get hit with the virus, right? And there's an 80% correlation with the funders of the Global Fund. So you got 195 countries in the world. Okay, you look at the top 20, you're talking Italy and obviously the United States and all these, largely European countries.
Talking about white. These are white countries.
These are the countries that fund the Global Fund.
Right.
And this is where we, Whitey and I looking at that like, wow, how about that, huh? And what happens so we're like, okay, they're going for another Global Fund. And 3 weeks later, there's Gates and his folks from World Health and UN. Hey, we need $2.5 trillion. How convenient. There were reports that came out in 2008 highlighting this, 2014, and then again in 2018. The government of the UK commissioned a report, and they're like, this is a massive, ticking time bomb that will have enormous, economic and demographic effects going forward in the developing world. And you know what? The people at the FDA, the people at PEPFAR, the people at the Gates Foundation, the people at the Clinton Foundation either knew or should have known what was going on. And you can't tell me that they didn't know. There's no doubt, because the FDA is hitting Ranbaxy, with these annual, consent decrees and injunctions. Like, you can't keep doing this. If there's one book that people want to read, there's this huge topic now going on in the country on problems with the supply chain of pharmaceuticals coming to our country from India and China. One book that people should read, written by a woman by the name of Catherine Eban. In fact, Michael, if you can get her as a guest, that would be a fabulous guest, called Bottle of Lies. In Bottle of Lies is the story of Ranbaxy. The primary source of information is the whistleblower Dinesh Thakur. It is a devastating read in terms of the supply chain and the incredible abuse in the supply chain of drugs. And this is what the Clinton Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and World Health were involved in distributing throughout the developing world. So you want to talk about racism? That's real racism.
And don't forget,
Larry, correct me.
Yeah.
Larry, I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong. As Gilead tries to step forward with remdesivir as some sort of panacea for this coronavirus, are they not the same company that the U.S. government is in an open litigation against for patent rights?
That is exactly right. That case was filed in late 2019, patent infringement. Gilead filed a counterclaim in late April. That's an ongoing case
in the federal courts.
That's right.
It's just all the same people, Mike.
And you know what? We're just a couple of Irish guys, willing to go to the mat for the American taxpayers, and we're not backing down.
Just one thing that jumps out at me with this new wrinkle with coronavirus and what looks like another round of charity schemes. The big difference it looks like to me is now Gates is finally not on the side where he gives money. He's on the side where he's going to get money. He's on the supply side of these vaccines, that's scary.
Well, that's a big change. That's why I called the previous case the JV game. We're in the JV game. This is now the varsity game. Right? Some of the bigger players are now no longer donors, but they're going to be suppliers of medicines, which are paid for by the Global Fund, World Health Organization. These medical medicinal funds that all these countries donate to, that's the pot of gold that everybody is attaching to. And yes, so in this case, if you're a stockholder in a major company, pharmaceutical distributor, that's where you're going for the funds, because this is such a global pandemic. That's where the source of funding will come from. Now you're on the recipient side.
And Michael, when President Trump announced, a week or so ago, that we were going to, discontinue the relationship and the funding of the World Health Organization, and obviously the World Health Organization, all these, global governments. But the World Health Organization, there's probably no single individual more prominently involved with that than Bill Gates. So when the president announces, you know what, we're going to discontinue, that was a headshot to Bill Gates. And Bill Gates is centrally involved in all of this, both from, a foundation standpoint, but then also, his investments that he's got in these different pharmaceutical companies as well. So he's, to say that he's conflicted would be an understatement. But this stuff all needs to get played out, and we're kind of in the middle of it, and we, we look forward to our day in court and playing it out and laying this all out there, right?
Well, we'll have you guys back. Hopefully, when we have you back, hopefully there will have been some action one way or the other in the tax court. I know you guys aren't going to, regardless of what happens, you have options. I understand the mechanisms of the legal system, so I know you still have options. And it's actually your options might be better if the tax court tells you to take a hike. Your options might be better. You might have more leverage.
We're not stopping. We're going to play it out as the hands are played back to us.
Oh, guys, thanks. And we'll pick this up at a later date, and we'll see how things play out. So God bless, and thanks for the time.
Okay, guys, so I edited an awful lot from that interview because it was so long. I think it was an hour and 40 minutes, but I wanted to keep it brief just to let you know and give you the essence of what these guys were doing and talking about. I'll leave a link in the description below for you to hear the whole podcast, because it does spend a lot of time about the Clinton papers and the legal process that's going through as well, as you would expect. And as far as I understand, it's the case of Gates and the contact tracing app and the money involved. That seems to be going, from what I picked up from the guys, some sort of legal procedure, which is why these guys were hesitant to talk too much about the details. But if it's going through legal procedure, then they've got absolute proof and paperwork that their claims are backed up with an awful lot of evidence. So, as always, support my channel in any way you can via PayPal, Patreon and Bitcoin, and I would suggest strongly that you share this smoking gun episode, because it might bring a little bit of hope and light to the rest of the world that this fight is far from over. And as always, question everything, believe nothing, and stay curious. I'll see you on deck very soon.